Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Moreno, and I'm a family nurse practitioner. I see patients via telemedicine out of the great state of Texas. I physically see patients out of the Rio Grande Valley. We are Gold Rush Health Solutions, and this is Let's Talk Health. Tonight's topic is Alzheimer's dementia. Let's start with our legal disclaimer, as we usually do for the evening. I want to give everyone an opportunity to go ahead and post whatever recommendations they have as far as topics. Again, my recommendation and goal is always to cater to the public. So if there's a particular topic of interest, I'd like to hear that particular recommendation. How's everyone doing tonight? Hopefully everyone's doing really well. What about these hot days? It's been extremely hot and dry. And as always, I want to remind you that I'd love to be your resource for the community. You can contact me in a multitude of ways. You can text me at 956-640-6963. That's my cell phone number. Tell me who you are. Feel free to ask whatever questions, comments, or concerns you may have. You can also message me on my website at www.goldrushhealthsolutions.com. There you'll see what services I offer with a brief description. You can also visit me at my Facebook page on Sharon Moreno and message me through Messenger. Again, I don't charge for questions, comments, or concerns. I only charge for services that I provide. I offer a multitude of services, many through telemedicine, meaning that there is never an office wait. None of my services I provide, there will ever be an office wait, but many of them I provide via telemedicine or over the phone. I also offer home visits. Example of services I provide include weight loss with the use of prescription pills where no diet is required. I also offer vitamin B12 injections. Question I get most commonly are, how do I know if I'm lacking vitamin B12? Well, there's a few symptoms that can lead us to believe that you may be low vitamin B12. As always, these symptoms don't absolutely mean that you're low on vitamin B12. So it's important that you discuss with your healthcare provider whatever questions, comments, or concerns you have. These symptoms include, but are not limited to, vision problems or changes in vision, forgetfulness, mood swing, depression, numbness or tingling, feeling tired, and or hair loss. I also offer steroid joint injections. Essentially, these are uh, injections that go directly in the joints. I inject shoulders, knees, hands, and feet. And so I use Kenalog and I use lidocaine in these particular areas. The pros to these particular injections is that it targets the specific area. I also offer antibiotic injections and or prescriptions for a variety of conditions. Some symptoms that may indicate you need an antibiotic include, but are not limited to, are sore throats, runny nose, stuffy nose, uh, earache, cough, fever, congestion, etc. Again, the goal here is that you always communicate with your healthcare provider and never self-diagnose. If you ever have any questions about do I have a bacterial infection or not, feel free to contact me again via Facebook Messenger at Sharon Moreno, via cell phone at 956-640-6963, or you can do it through my website at www.goldrushhealthsolutions.com. Alrighty, so let's get started with our topic of choice today, and that's Alzheimer's dementia. So this is a pretty common illness that I've seen a significant amount in the area. How many of you have a family member, a loved one, a friend who have this particular illness? I'm willing to bet that each and every one of you have at least someone that you know that has suffered from this particular illness. So, as you know, I love statistics because it gives us a bird's eye view of exactly how significant this particular illness is. So, we'll start with about 1 in 9 people aged over 65 have Alzheimer's dementia. So, we have 1 in 9 people. That's quite significant. That's a lot of people. We also have the lifetime risk for Alzheimer's dementia at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. That's quite significant. At age 45, that's young. We already have 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. So that's some of the reasons why I'm talking about this again, because it's pretty significant. And so we need to know, what can I do about it? How can I try to prevent it? And how is it going to devastate my life if I can't prevent it? Okay. So overview, a few things to keep in mind regarding Alzheimer's dementia or dementia in general. So the sad thing is there really isn't a cure. That's the issue. Once it's there, it's there. We can try to slow the progression, but other than that, once it's more advanced, it's advanced, and that's that. Brain cells die over time and the brain shrinks. The disease begins years before the symptoms. So the issue is you really have this before you really even know that you actually have this. Once the symptoms start to begin, or you notice the symptoms happen, you've already actually had the diagnosis way before you've realized that it happened. So you won't actually have the diagnosis until sometime down the road, but that doesn't mean that you aren't ill. Um, so symptoms, what could lead us to believe possibly that you have this particular illness? So things like repeating statements and questions over and over. So if you have a family member, a friend, and or a loved one with Alzheimer's dementia, this is going to sound very familiar. They tend to repeat things over and over again. I have many patients with Alzheimer's dementia, and I'll start the visit and they'll say things like, what did you eat today? And I tell them, I had chorizo con huevo and it was really good. Ah, qué bueno, mija. And then I'll get to asking a few more questions, and then they'll ask me again, ¿Y qué comiste hoy, mija? And I'll be like, oh, I had chorizo con huevo and it was very good. Then I'll say a few more things, and then they say, ¿Y qué comiste hoy, mija? And they just keep asking the question like as if they would have never asked the question, period. They forget conversation, appointments, or events, so they're very forgetful. They misplace items or often put them in places that don't make sense. What I've also seen is they're very skeptical in the sense that they often accuse people of stealing items. So they'll say that they're hiding things, or they'll hide things and then say, this thing is missing, and be careful with X person or X people because they're stealing from me. So they put something somewhere, they have no idea where they put it, and then they assume that it's been stolen from them as a result. They get lost in places they used to know well. So let's say they used to go to a particular outing, and now all of a sudden it doesn't seem familiar to them anymore. They're like, they can't find their way around certain places. So we had a particular instance where a particular lady was very functional. She drove around town. All of a sudden, she used to go from place A and place B, B being her home. Well, she went to place A. There was a grocery store, which she drove there all the time. B being her home. She drove out to the grocery store one day. She made it to the grocery store, and for the love of her, she could not remember how to get back home. And this was out of her character, out of her norm. We have Alma here who says, hi, Sharon. Hi, Alma. How are you doing? Good to have you back. I haven't seen you for a few shows, so I'm glad you're back with us. Continuing with symptoms. They forget the names of family members and everyday objects. So they may see a family member that they normally refer to them as by their name, and all of a sudden they're saying mija or mijo. Um, when it's early onset, when they're barely starting in just the stages of being forgetful, they realize that they're forgetting things. And they're trying to play this off. They're trying to hide it. Once it's more advanced, then they're in a place where they don't realize what's going on, and they're not trying to hide it. They have no idea what's going on. So at this point, their behavior is their behavior. But initially, they try to hide it and cover things up, try to cover up their illness. They have trouble finding the right words, expressing thoughts, or having conversations. So they may be in the middle of a conversation and lose their words, or used to be extremely affluent, fluent with conversations, and now all of a sudden their conversations don't see their terminology don't seem as broad anymore. It seems to be in a place where they're having trouble expressing themselves. So they become somewhat reclusive because they're embarrassed. They seem like, I don't want to sound ignorant. Let me just not go out anymore. Again, they're still in the process initially of trying to hide this illness because they realize that something's going on. Um, it causes trouble in them when they're concentrating and thinking, especially about abstract concepts such as numbers. So they may not be able to do things like calculate certain basic things, or count backwards. We're having people do certain things and check their memory and abstract thinking. I'll ask them, okay, can you, do even numbers for me? Can you count backwards? And they're unable to do this. It may be hard to make sensible decisions and judgments. So things that were, rather easy for them to come up with, now it's a big task for them to all of a sudden, come up with simple things. So Alma says she's doing good. I just had a lot going on. Well, I suppose that's good. Keeping busy is good news. I'm glad to hear that keeping busy. And then she asks, is dementia hereditary? Absolutely. And we're definitely going to talk about that. It is absolutely hereditary. We're going to talk about that as a risk factor. It is. Um, So we're going to continue to talk about symptoms. What other symptoms are associated with dementia? Things like depression. So we may see that these people become depressed because remember, initially they realize, man, why can't I express myself like I used to? Why can't I find my words? Why am I forgetting people's names? Why am I getting lost? And so this makes people feel really sad. They're realizing that they have a loss of independence, a loss of function, and they may not know exactly what's going on, but they realize that something is going on. They have a loss of interest in activities. Again, we talked about feeling shame, embarrassment, and being around people, and sounding ignorant. And so, again, they realize something's not quite right. I don't know what it is. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to say anything. I just don't have the desire to do things anymore because I just don't sound intelligent like I used to. This social withdrawal. I'm just gonna stay to myself. Mood swings, dementia when they're just barely starting, and even in the more advanced stages, it kind of goes in and out. This is an issue with neurons and stuff. And so sometimes we have a situation where you have good days and the brain sends good signals to the body. And so you have good commands. So memory is better. People are finding their words better. Their their behaviors are better. So they're like, today's a good day. Let me get out. Let me do things. I feel more positive. Maybe it was a vitamin I took. Maybe it was that metformin I took. Or maybe it was my tia that did brujeria on me. Who knows? I don't really know, but maybe it was just an isolated thing. And then the next few days, they start feeling like this again. They're like, dang it to heck. It's back. The tia's doing brujeria again on me. And so they kind of have these mood swings because they're not necessarily sure what's going on. They just know that something's there. Again, not trusting others. They're not necessarily sure, is it me? Is it other people making me feel like this? Is it someone else doing something to me? Is somebody putting something in my food, in my water? Is it my children making me feel like this because they don't want me to be independent? Are they trying to take my money away from me? So again, it's a whole big issue with trust and just who knows what to believe. There's just a bunch of a variety of symptoms and not necessarily knowing where all this stuff is coming from. We have anger or aggression. Remember when people are going through a loss of independence, then we go through the 5 stages of grief known as Kubler-Ross, and one of those stages is anger. Why? Why me? Why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? And so you may see that the patient is angry, irritable, has periods where they are ugly to family members, ugly to loved ones, and kind of just want to be alone. They may have changes in sleep habits where at night they're up uh, with their mind wandering, again trying to figure things out. Why is this happening to me? Is this really me, or is this not somebody else doing something to me? you know is something really happening, or is this a fiction of my imagination? Why am I having good days and then I have bad days? Maybe somebody's doing something to me. So it's this kind of like my mind's playing tricks on me kind of deal. You may have wandering again as things start to get more advanced. You may have people who try to get out of the house. Um, when you have Alzheimer's that starts initially, you may have something like sundowners. So when the sunlight goes down, people tend to become a bit more confused. It's not severe, but maybe like, you know what, let me go home when they're actually in their home. So they may try to wander outside the house. I've seen many times where we have like silver alerts or code silvers on TV or on signs outside or on your phone saying that there's a missing elderly person who's at risk, that they have dementia or some cognitive issue, stating that they're confused, they got in their vehicle, they took off, and now the family is concerned about them because they can't find them. So it's really important that if you have somebody who's even initial stages of Alzheimer's, to really remove the keys from them and to put safeguards on the door so that either they can reach the locks or they're not able to manipulate the locks and get out, because it really is a safety issue. In the middle of the night, if you have somebody wander outside, it's dark in the streets, you risk them being ran over or kidnapped, raped, molested, just a variety of things, negative things that could absolutely happen. I have Alma here with a question. She says, does someone with no history of relatives with dementia, can they still develop it? And what are the reasons? So the issue with Alzheimer's dementia is it's not completely understood. And the answer is yes. So if there's an issue, this has to do with genetics per se. So let's say when the DNA is being created within ourselves, if there is some, I don't want to say misfire, but if there is some mishap with with our genetic makeup, and with the genetic makeup, yes, we can actually end up with Alzheimer's dementia. A big issue with dementia is that it does come from genetics, as well as a variety of other things, which we're going to talk about: sedentary lifestyle, obesity. So it may not necessarily be from genetics. You could end up inheriting it from a lot of other reasons: pollution, like smog from vehicles, burning wood. So if you don't end up getting it from genetics, you could end up getting it from a variety of other reasons, again, which we'll end up talking about it. But once one of the stronger areas is genetics. But the answer to your question is yes, even if you have absolutely no history, you still can end up with dementia. Loss of inhibitions. delusions, such as believing something has been stolen when it hasn't. So we talked about that earlier. They become in a place where they're very suspicious of people. They think that people are out to get them. I've been in places where I've gone to see patients, and I've seen them on the phone calling the police on their providers, saying that their providers are stealing from them, or they're holding them hostage. And of course, the sheriff or the police department, law enforcement ends up going out, of course, having to investigate. Um, so, I mean, it's somewhat of a big issue. They're just extremely distrusting, and they'll sit and they'll tell me that, I need to be careful with the provider, that they're stealing from me, that we need to make a police report and things of that nature. And I want to say that sometimes it's true, so we need to try to figure out, okay, is this something that this allegation is actually true, or this allegation is not? I mean, there are providers or people that steal and are being abused and taken advantage of, but there also are people who are ill and truly not being taken advantage of. So, it's somewhat of a sticky matter there. So causes. So Alma, this is a place that's going to answer your questions as far as if it's not genetics, well, how can someone end up with Alzheimer's dementia? As I mentioned, it's not fully understood, but but at a basic level, brain proteins don't function as usual, which disrupts the work of brain cells, also known as neurons, and triggers a series of events. The neurons become damaged and lose connections to each other and eventually die. So that's the issue. It's a communication problem. You know, the brain is not communicating with the body as it should. There's a lack of communication. Brain cells die. The brain shrinks, and so we have a problem. Remember, the brain is kind of like the central processing unit in a computer. If the central processing unit or the motherboard isn't working, then the computer itself doesn't work very well or doesn't work at all. And that's kind of the issue with our body, is that if the brain isn't working and isn't sending messages, then we're kind of like a sitting duck, sort of like a baby without the mother. The baby kind of just sits there and, is extremely vulnerable. The mother has to come, guide the baby, and do things for the baby. Uh, so the brain plays an extremely important role with essentially everything. It's believed that it's caused by a combination of genetic, lifestyle, and environmental factors that affect the brain over time. So again, we talked about that people actually have this particular disease before having realized it. So let's say I have a symptom today and I get a diagnosis actually today. The reality is that I've had this illness way before has even been realized, but I had no symptoms. And the reality is that when people feel well and there are no symptoms, we really aren't looking for things until, well, why is my family so forgetful? And usually two main reasons I see the patient being sent to come see me. One, because they keep repeating things over and over again. And two, because they're very forgetful. They forget things that normally they weren't forgetful. They're like, I don't know what's going on with my mother, but she's repeating things over. She keeps saying that these same things over and over and over again. And then she's extremely forgetful. She used to say this, and now she can't remember if she took her medicines or not. I asked her if she's hungry, and she's saying she hasn't eaten and she ate earlier. So those are the main reasons why people get sent into the clinic. And Alma has another question here. She says, can some medications be a cause to develop dementia? So I haven't seen any particular medications that are linked to specific diagnosis of dementia. I will say that there are certain medications that can mimic dementia-like symptoms, like they can cause brain fog and things of that nature. Also, lack of vitamin B12 can also cause forgetfulness. So I've never seen a particular medication that they say has been linked to Alzheimer's dementia per se, but definitely medications can be linked to increased forgetfulness and things of that nature. Juliana has a question, a great question. She says, hello, Sharon. At what age does dementia begin? So there are two diagnoses of dementia. Most common diagnosis of dementia is dementia at late onset, and that begins at age 65. That's the most common diagnosis. If we have Alzheimer's dementia early onset, that's 64 years and below. So that's less common, but that absolutely can happen. And I have seen patients in their 50s with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia. Again, that's not as common, but it most certainly can happen. So it can happen at any time, and the documented diagnosis just depends on what age. But most commonly, it happens 65 and older. Um, so we have risk factors again, like what sorts of things, and again, this is ties into your question as well, Alma. What risk factors, what can lead us to possibly end up in this particular situation, which isn't exciting? I've always said that there's two things as I age that I would like not to be affected. And one is my mind. I would like my mind to stay sharp. And the second one is my ability to eat. Because if you know me well, you know I love to eat great food. And two, I work with my mind. So I would like my mind not to be affected. If you need to amputate my feet or my legs or my hands, well, you know, I guess that's what needs to happen, right? But please don't take my mind away. Keep my mind sharp, and please don't take my ability to eat because I want to continue to savor food. It's a coping mechanism of mine. But we shall see as I age, right? So risk factors. Older age. This is kind of what you were asking about, Juliana. So 65 years and older is the strongest known risk factor. So as we age, as we hit 65 years or older, that's the biggest risk factor. It's wear and tear on our body. As we age, it increases our risk for Alzheimer's dementia or dementia, because there are a variety of dementias, but Alzheimer's dementia is the most common one. Family history and genetics. This is part of your question, Alma. Risk is higher if a first degree relative, such as a parent or a sibling, is diagnosed. So again, genetics uh, plays a factor if any family member is diagnosed, but even more so if it's a first degree relative, such as a parent or a sibling is diagnosed. Down syndrome. So if you have been diagnosed with Down syndrome, then again this appears to be you're at higher risk for Alzheimer's. And I've seen this many times. I've had multiple Down syndrome patients with Alzheimer's dementia in their 40s or 50s. These are the younger patients that end up with this. And it's likely related to them having the three copies of the chromosome 21. Is what makes them have Down syndrome. Symptoms tend to appear 10 to 20 years earlier than they do in the general population. So remember, we're talking about, 65 years of age is more commonly seen in our general population. Well, 10 to 20 years. So we're talking about 55 or 45 years, the diagnosis happens in the Down syndrome population. Remember, the Down syndrome people don't tend to live as long as, they're not 85, 95, 100 years old. These are about 65, 50s or 60s that they're living. So they don't have that overall time. Um, you know, Female gender. Overall, there are more women as they tend to live longer than men. I guess that's the risk that we have to take, right? You know, what's the downside of that? Well, we don't live as long, but we're not at higher risk for Alzheimer's, but so it's kind of like, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Um, Another diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment. So it's kind of like, I don't want to use it because that's not what they use. That's not how they see it. But mild cognitive impairment is kind of like a pre-Alzheimer's, in the sense that these people simply have the memory component. They don't have any of the repetition stuff. It's more simply they have a bigger decline in memory or other thinking skills than is usual for the person's age. So it's not like younger versus older. It's simply at whatever age they have, we should have a certain amount of memory and thinking skills. And if the said person is out of the normal range, then they can be diagnosed with this mild cognitive impairment. So people with this particular diagnosis tend to be at higher risk for Alzheimer's dementia. Not necessarily surprising because they already have a compromised, memory function. So that's there. Head injury, somebody who's aged 50 or older who's already had a traumatic brain injury or multiple traumatic brain injuries. Again, not necessarily surprising there. If you had a blow to the head, then, you already have, something related to the head. And this is a disease of the brain, of the head. So that's, somewhat of an issue there as well. Alma has another comment here. She says, my cousin's wife developed dementia or maybe Alzheimer's around 59. Yeah, so that was an early onset dementia. So Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. We call it Alzheimer's dementia. Around 59, and now she's completely bedridden and she's 69. Yep. So dementia or Alzheimer's dementia is kind of one of those diagnoses uh, that declines. And so what we can hope for is that the decline is steady and not the decline is, slow and steady versus very steep. And most definitely bedridden is one of those places that they definitely can go. And we'll talk about that later on today. They can end up in a place where they're no longer eating. They can't do anything for themselves. They're not speaking anymore. They're 100% dependent on a caregiver to have everything done, from brushing their hair, from feeding them, changing their, from their bowels and bladder, repositioning them. So literally everything. If they don't have a caregiver, then they won't exist. So it's a really tough place. There's a big strain on the caregiver. Provider services literally serve nothing for the patient because they may get 4 hours a day, but this is a 24-hour job. It just doesn't end. And there's a lot of caregiver strain, and sometimes they're in a place where they get burned out and sometimes very angry and negative towards the patient because of this burnout and strain. Oh, and Alma also says, also my aunt by marriage died of Alzheimer's, and we think that one of her sons is developing also. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Again, this is one of those diagnoses that is so, so taxing. Again, there's not much treatment that helps it. Once people start with the initial stages of Alzheimer's, there's some treatment that helps kind of prolong the memory related issues and the repetition of stuff. But once the patient's at a point where they're, already forgetting, this affects not the old memories, it affects the recent stuff. So these people will know their name, they'll remember relatives that have passed away, old addresses. But if you ask them what did they have for breakfast or did they have breakfast, those kind of things they won't remember. Things of today, that's what they have difficulty with. It's the current memory that's affected. It's an issue. And so once that sort of memory is gone and, they're at a place where they're more dependent, then those medications don't serve little to no benefit essentially. And they end up causing, placing the patient at a risk for more side effects than anything. So when I see patients on these medications, I just discontinue them because again, they serve little to no benefit, for the patient. So I'm not going to have the patient swallowing a bunch of medications where they're at risk for side effects and, again, little to no benefit. So it's a really, really tough diagnosis, again, because of lack of treatment, because of lack of, adequate treatment in more advanced stages. and just the taxation, the difficulty the diagnosis plays on the caregiver's training. So continuing with these risk factors. So we talked about air pollution, things like traffic, exhaust, and burning wood. So if you live in a city where there's a lot of smog, or, out in the country where people are burning a lot of wood, or you have a fireplace where you burn wood and there's a lot of cold weather, excuse me, then, this again predisposes people more to Alzheimer's, dementia, or dementia period. Heavy alcohol use. So people who tend to drink a lot, can end up with this particular situation, and the particular dementia that's been linked to is the early onset. So this wouldn't be 65 or older. It would be a diagnosis. They'd end up with the symptoms 64 and younger. So, again, it's a tough place. Other risk factors include poor sleep patterns. I don't know how many presentations I've gone over that discuss issues with sleep and how sleep affects so many things. And so that's why with my weight loss patients and anybody that I essentially talk about, essentially anyone that I see, I really discuss sleep because sleep is extremely important. If people aren't sleeping well, and what I mean by well is not the amount of hours you're sleeping. I mean I'm talking about the adequacy of your sleep. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality. I'd rather somebody sleep 4 hours and wake up feeling rested and full of energy versus somebody who sleeps 8 hours, who wakes up feeling tired, like they didn't sleep at all. So, there's a few things that affect that. When we sleep and we go into that deep REM sleep, this is when we quote unquote recharge our batteries. And if this isn't happening, again, another thing that this can lead to is Alzheimer's dementia. We're kind of like overworking our body and not given an opportunity to rest and refuel and recharge. This is extremely important. So poor sleep patterns, whether it be difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up feeling tired, and diagnosis of sleep apnea, where you fall asleep at night and your body stops breathing for a few seconds on and off throughout the night. In this case, you end up with a machine that helps force air down your throat so that you're not having these periods where you're stopping breathing. Lifestyle and heart health. You have issues like illness, lifestyle factors such as, again, obesity. That's another thing that causes so many health related issues. If you're obese, you have a heart related issues, you have a sleep related issues, you have joint related issues, so many things. And, the list can keep going on and on and on with that. High blood pressure is another one of those problematic things. High cholesterol is another one. Poorly managed diabetes, smoking, sedentary lifestyle. All these things can cause blood vessel changes in the brain. Again, poor circulation to the brain, which can lead to ultimately Alzheimer's dementia. Vision loss that goes without treatment. So if you have poor vision, or in a place where you completely go blind and you're not treating that, so you in a place where you ultimately end up blind, then that can also lead to Alzheimer's dementia. Lifelong learning and social engagement. So being social and doing activities stimulate the mind. We need to keep our mind busy. Low education levels, less than high school, is also a risk factor. Again, things being social, I think I'm going to end up with Alzheimer's dementia because I'm zero social. I don't do anything at all other than work and see my dogs. So I think I'm going to end up with Alzheimer's dementia. But I will say that I do have education levels higher than high school. So I guess at least that helps. And I do stimulate my mind. I do read and, provide education. So hopefully that helps me out. But maybe I'll have to throw in a social event here and there, just throw my body a bone and not end up with Alzheimer's dementia, because that's, again, something I would prefer not to have. And I have a comment here. Hi, Clarissa. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us again. So let's talk about some complications. So let's say, unfortunately, we talked about risk factors. So let's say you have one or more of these risk factors, and ultimately you end up, unfortunately, with this particular illness. So what kind of complications are we looking at? So we could end up with things where the person with Alzheimer's dementia may not be able to tell someone about being in pain. So they may not be able to express a variety of things, such as not being able to voice their pain, not being able to express symptoms of other illnesses, not being able to follow a treatment plan. So somebody with Alzheimer's dementia, let's say they have diabetes and they're supposed to be taking insulin, they may not be able to check their sugars and take their insulin as they're supposed to now. Not able to explain medication side effects. So, if they're still supposed to be on the insulin and someone else is injecting them, and now they have low blood sugars where they're feeling dizzy and sweating, they may not be able to voice that either. They may inhale food or liquid into the lungs, so now they may have difficulty swallowing the food. And as a result, it's going into their lungs. Now, when we have this issue with the lungs, if they may end up with flus, pneumonias, or other infections as a result. And remember, they may not be able to voice, hey, I have this cough, or I'm choking on food. So now guess what? The caretaker is going to have to be more vigilant as far as symptoms like, I don't know, I'm hearing this wheezing sound on my mother, or I'm noticing that every time I give them some orange juice, my mother is coughing, or I noticed that my mother's eating less, and now every time I give them the insulin, she wakes up drenched, her PJs wake up drenched. So again, we have to be a bit more hyper vigilant and see, being an advocate for the patient because they're now not able to do these things on their own. Things like falls or fractures, they're confused. They have that sundowners thing where all of a sudden it starts to become a little dark. They get up, they're now dizzy or sweating from the low blood sugar, and they fall and now they have a fracture at their hip. That's a big thing. I've seen patients many times get up, have a fracture, and are never able to walk again. It's a huge, huge problem. I've seen it so many times. Bed sores. This picture here is a picture of a very ugly bed sore. This is an unstageable decubitus ulceration to the buttocks. You can see that black area there. That black area, I tend to want to, the treatment here would be to remove that black tissue. It's dead tissue. These kind of sores really aren't painful because it's dead tissue and they're deep. They already hit the nerve areas. Although they look ugly, they're generally not painful for the patients. This is an advanced bed sore already. But these are the sorts of things that happen. And why do these things happen? Pressure. Patient is not getting turned like they should. Decreased circulation. Poor nutrition. They're not having protein intake like they should. Poor fluid intake. They're not drinking water like they should. So a variety of things. They're not advocating for themselves and no one's advocating for them. So we talked about poor nutrition or hydration again. Protein's not there. Oral intake's not there. They're not eating. They used to have 3 meals. Now they're having 2, then ultimately 1. And then sometimes they skip days without meals. Then on top of that, they have constipation or diarrhea. So now we have, liquid poop on top of this area that's creating, infection. So that's a tough place. Alma has a comment here. She says, oh, that's sad. My cousin says that his wife is developing bed sores even with them taking care of her. One of her sons is a nurse at least one of the big hospitals in Mexico. Yes. So the thing is that it's a lot of times It may be technique. So let's say the patient is being turned, but it may have to do with the technique. So sometimes if you pull or push the patient, that sheer friction may cause some of the decubitus ulcerations. Let's say they're being turned every 2 hours, but it may have to do with a proper nutrition. The patient may not be taking in adequate protein intake, or the patient may be eating good food, but it may still not be appropriate intake of protein. Or they may be eating great protein, but the body may not be metabolizing the protein. So there's a variety of things that can cause this. Sometimes there's external factors, sometimes there's internal factors, and sometimes there's internal and external factors. But in this particular case, we treat the decubitus ulceration, do some wound care, do antibiotic treatment if it warrants it. It doesn't look like it's oozing. It looks pretty clean right now. So just looking at what I'm seeing, I wouldn't give any antibiotic treatment there. I would just, either debride it by removing the black tissue, do some special wound care, and try to push fluid and protein and offloading the area and see how the patient does. And you'll be surprised. I've seen wounds worse than this that heal. So this isn't impossible. And on the same token, I've seen wounds that are, less worse than this that just never heal. They just get worse, worse, worse. And, again, it just depends whether it's internal, external factors that's, sort of creating this. But again, the issue with Alzheimer's dementia is all the complications that happen. Look at all the things that we've listed. It's sort of that the patient kind of loses control of themselves. They can't voice any pain. So, they're laying on their buttocks all the time. Normally, sit on a sofa, watch TV. After a while, you're like, man, my butt fell asleep and you have to move. Well, guess what? These people can't voice that anymore. So the issue is that if someone's not, doing it for them, you know, advocating for them, then they don't get turned. You know, again, the same things. They have symptoms of other illnesses. They may have a sore throat. Well, if you don't notice that they're, spitting out their food and you look in their throat and notice that it's red, we'll never know. It's kind of like that baby. You have to be vigilant and advocate for the person. Otherwise, look at all these things. Diola says, hi, Sharon, been listening to you, but forgot to send a message. Diola, we cannot have that. But I'll tell you what, it's better late than never. So thank you. I appreciate you for popping in. Thank you for always being a faithful listener. When I don't see you say hi, I assume that you're not here. So I appreciate you. And so again, this is kind of the issue that, that we're talking about. And she says it's such an interesting topic. It is. Remember how many Alzheimer's patients we used to see in the clinic, Viola? It's devastating. And I'm willing to bet that everyone that has commented here, and even the ones that haven't commented here, I'm willing to bet that everyone knows someone who has Alzheimer's dementia. It's just extremely common, and everyone's willing to speak on the fact that this is really a devastating illness. Um, the patient may not be in a place where they're bedbound at this point, but they're definitely in a place where they need help. And again, what I most commonly hear is, "Oh, I know my mother's driving me nuts. She keeps repeating and repeating." I've also heard where they become like aggressive and they start cursing, and they say ugly things, and so the family member is hurt. They're offended. They're like, she called me, a B word, or she called me this, and I tell them, look, don't be offended, because a patient has no idea really what they're doing. They have no control of this, offensive things that they're saying. They just really don't. And so there just becomes somewhat of a hostile environment. I'm like, if you go after the patient and you tell them, they're like, oh, son chiflazones, don't behave like that. I mean, they're spoiled. I've heard that too, no, que, es chiflada or son chiflazones or whatever. But the reality is the patient has no control. They're like, well, see, why is it that yesterday they were fine and today, pues, es chiflada, But the reality is that your brain sometimes sends appropriate signals. And so it's like, oh, yay, you're great, and your body gets the messages that it needs to get. And so it functions like it should. And then other days, the signals aren't being sent like they should. And the message isn't there. And so your body's kind of like that baby sitting in the middle of the floor, like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And so unless someone comes and picks that baby up and does something with it, then the baby's kind of just like a sitting duck there, doesn't know what to do. So that's kind of the issue, and it takes a lot of education with the family members with this declining process. It goes from repetitive stuff, forgetfulness, decreased appetite, aggression, wandering, weight loss, dependence on a bunch of activities, and things of that nature. Ray, oh my God, I know, my eye. So I had a bleed in my eye. So Ray's talking about hope I feel better soon. So I had a bleed in my eye. And I posted on Facebook. I was like, bleed in my eye or not, we got it. The show must go on. I have to, present my show tonight. And so I'm here talking. I didn't cancel my show. So thank you, Ray. I appreciate you. And you're always welcome on my show. Everyone misses you. So anytime you want to come in and whenever you're ready, I'm happy to have you back. So thank you. Thank you for popping in and saying hi um and your sweet messages. But yeah, so that's essentially the issue, It's oh, okay. Yeah, see, that's the thing about it is Ray is now rich and famous, and so he don't have time for us little people anymore. He's has a bunch of chess classes now, so he's busy making it rain over there. I still don't have that luck. There's not much rain in my area, so I'm still working with my population. But that's okay. That's great. I'm glad you're doing well with your chess stuff. You're an awesome teacher, so I'm not surprised that you're doing really well with your classes. So best of luck to you on that and your classes. But yeah, so guys, if you definitely need any chess classes, please reach out to Ray. He definitely is top of the top for the chess classes. I'll tell you what, I don't know how to play chess. I barely know how to play checkers. But so I can't teach you anything when it comes to chess. I just know it's a game of the mind. So I may not do too well with that. But anyway, regarding Alzheimer's, yeah, it's a pretty devastating illness. And it's quite common. I just say that I hope I don't end up with that. But if I do, we'll see. I'll have to put the burden on one of my sisters to take care of me. Questions, guys? Questions, comments, or concerns? Again, if you have them, you can always ask here. Topics of choice, feel free to place them here. If not, rest assured, I'll always come up with something. Um, again, this is my flyer. Um, we have here, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please always text me 956-640-6963. If you call, I won't answer. I never answer my phone. I have way too much going on to answer phone calls. I'm sorry. I just don't. Text me. You can also message me through Facebook Messenger at Sharon Moreno, or you can send a message through my website at www.goldrushhousesolutions.com. I have another message here from Alma. She says, your Theo noticed that you had something in your eye. He was looking at one of your posts. Hope it gets better. Yeah, I had a bleed in my eye. You know, the issue is that I also get sick every once in a while, but I'm not one to ever stop what I'm doing. I literally have to be dying. I really don't get sick much. If anything, I probably get sick once a year. And last year I didn't get sick at all. So yeah, I have a bleed on my right eye, but I'll be okay. My daddy always says, "Yerba mala nunca muere." So I think I'll be here for a while. But thank you. I appreciate it. And B says, hi, Sharon, great information. Thank you, B. I appreciate you. Yes, absolutely. Alzheimer's dementia is like super common. I see it all the time. Yes, so again, back to services, please, guys, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know. I'm here to be your resource. Like I said, I don't charge for any of these things. I only charge for services I provide. And I'll always give you prices up front. Hey, this is the price for the service, you know, and if you agree, then we move forward. And if you don't, then that's okay too. I never offended. But I will tell you, I absolutely have the best prices there are. I am second to none with customer service, pricing, and office waits. You know why? Because there are no office waits. And Diola says, thank you for the information. Take care of you and have a blessed evening. Thank you, Diola. Likewise. And we'll see you for next week on Wednesday. All right, guys. Well, I think that if there's no questions, comments, or concerns, I think that wraps up this evening's show. Remember, I am Sharon Moreno. I am a family nurse practitioner, and I practice in this great state of Texas. I do telemedicine, as I mentioned, in this great state of Texas, and I see physical patients in the Rio Grande Valley. We are Gold Rush Health Solutions, and this is Let's Talk Health. This was Alzheimer's dementia. Until next Wednesday, guys, we'll see you at 8 o'clock p.m.